One phone call to the Pentagon was all it took to destroy their careers and show the world that injustice has no hiding place. It should have been nothing more than a quiet drive across rural Louisiana, the kind of stretch most travelers only cross on their way to bigger cities. General Naomi Ellsworth had driven roads like this countless times before. No escorts, no flashing convoys, just her, a rented sedan, and a strict timetable. She was due for a classified briefing at Barksdale Air Force Base and had no room for interruptions. But somewhere past Lafayette, near a forgotten town called Mosswood, the signal on her secure line began to falter. She needed connection, not later, not in an hour, but immediately. She spotted a rundown filling station called Kelly's Fuel and Food and turned into its cracked parking lot. It wasn't much, but it would do. Naomi parked along the far edge, away from the front entrance where a few locals lounged against dusty pickup trucks, trading stories in the heavy southern heat. To her, it was nothing, just a place to catch a signal. She stepped out, lifted the encrypted phone, and identified herself. General Ellsworth, authentication confirmed. Beginning transmission, she said evenly. On the other end, a Pentagon officer began issuing live directives. Sensitive movements, restricted operations, intelligence for only a handful of ears. Naomi scanned the lot the way her training demanded, calm but alert, though her attention remained fixed on the words spilling through the line. A few people by the pumps began staring. She didn't look like anyone who belonged there, not to them, and not like anyone with authority either. No uniform, no badge, just jeans, plain sneakers, an olive jacket, and a cap pulled low across her cropped twists. Ordinary clothes, exactly how she wanted it. But perception is rarely about reality. Inside the station, Paula Sweeney, 50-something with a tight blonde knot and a face hardened by years of suspicion, watched from behind the counter. She didn't see one of the nation's highest-ranking officers on a mission. She didn't even see a woman on a phone. She saw trouble. Picking up the wired landline, Paula kept her voice low so the customers wouldn't catch it. "Got a suspicious woman out by the pumps," she whispered. "Looks strung out, acting off. Y'all should send someone quick." She hung up before the dispatcher could press for details. Across town, two officers picked up the call with half a grin. Mosswood didn't have much excitement, and a little drama on a slow afternoon sounded just fine. Sliding on mirrored sunglasses, they gunned their cruiser toward Kelly's. Back at the lot, Naomi remained steady, listening as critical instructions came through the secure channel. She had no idea that trouble was already bearing down on her. The flash of red and blue lights flickered across the glass front of the station, catching her eye as the cruiser skidded in, gravel flying. Lowering the phone for just a second, Naomi squinted into the glare. Two officers were already out before the car had stopped moving. The bigger one, Randall Cooper, mid-30s, buzz-cut and broad shoulders, unclipped his holster in one motion. The other, Sean Delaney, younger, leaner, his nerves hidden beneath false confidence, copied him. Both approached like men looking for confrontation. Naomi felt the shift in the air. Calmly, she set the secure phone on the hood of her car and lifted both hands, palms open. Her voice stayed measured, controlled, the kind of discipline hammered into her since West Point. "Good afternoon, officers. How can I assist you?" she asked evenly. Cooper barked back. "License and registration now." Naomi took a deliberate half-step, hand moving slowly toward the wallet in her back pocket. "Certainly. My ID is right here. I'm active duty." General Naomi Ellsworth, traveling on official orders. Delaney gave a sharp laugh. "A general? That what you're going with?" Naomi withdrew her credentials and federal travel papers, extending them with steady hands. Cooper snatched them, glanced for barely a second, then shook his head. "These are bogus," he muttered, tossing her ID onto the hood like it was nothing. Naomi's eyes narrowed, her composure cracking for the first time. "Officer, I assure you." "Shut it," Delaney cut in, sneering. "You think you can pull a stunt here? Wrong town, lady." By now, a crowd had gathered. Customers who lingered, clerks who stepped outside, drivers refueling who decided to watch. Some whispered, some chuckled, none intervened. Naomi's training screamed to de-escalate, but instinct told her these men weren't after truth. They'd already chosen what she was and what she wasn't. Officer, she tried again, her voice calm but heavier. Call your commanding officer. You're making a grave mistake. But Cooper already had cuffs in hand. Turn around, hands behind your back. Naomi didn't move, not to resist, but because something heavier rooted her. I am a general in the United States Army, she said firmly. You are now unlawfully detaining me. Cooper laughed, loud and dismissive, so the crowd heard it bounce across the pumps. Sure, and I'm the president. Now turn around. Before she could finish another word, Delaney gripped her arm rough, Cooper twisting the other behind her. The cuffs bit into her wrists, metal pinching flesh. Naomi clenched her jaw, swallowing the sharp burn of humiliation. Behind her, the secure Pentagon phone clattered to the ground, still connected. A voice crackled through the speaker, shouting her name, but the officers didn't notice or didn't care. Cooper shoved her against the rental's door, the slam rattling the frame. Gasps rose from the onlookers. Got her, Delaney announced, like he'd bagged a trophy. Naomi, breathing hard, fixed her stare on the filthy glass of Kelly's fuel and food. Her own reflection fractured into a dozen broken pieces. At that moment, she wasn't a general. She wasn't even a person to them, just someone to be manhandled because they could. But inside the Pentagon, the alarms were already flashing red, and her absence wasn't going to stay quiet for long. In Washington, the secure feed went from troubling to urgent in under a minute. Lieutenant Commander Bryce Hanley, sitting before a wall of screens, stared at the line-tagged General Ellsworth Secure. The audio was chaos, shouts, scuffling, static, then silence. Bryce leaned to the mic. General Ellsworth, this is Command Ops. Do you copy? General Ellsworth, respond. Nothing. Across the room, Colonel Dana Sharp was already striding forward. Trace a signal, she ordered, voice cutting through the noise. Now. Within moments, a tech pulled up the blinking marker, not near the base, not even close. A gas station off Highway 173 in Mosswood, a dot on the map most of them hadn't even heard of. Sharp's jaw tightened as she leaned over Bryce's shoulder. Get Barksdale Command on the line and loop in JAG. If anything's happened to Naomi, we don't wait. Meanwhile, back in Mosswood, Naomi sat cuffed on the curb, back pressed to the station wall, sweat sliding down her neck. Cooper loomed over her. What's your real name? He demanded. Delaney loomed over her, voice sharp as broken glass. Who you working for? Naomi drew a slow breath through her nose. You already have my credentials, my travel orders. Everything you need is in your hands. Cooper gave a short, ugly laugh. Lady, you're seconds from an obstruction charge. Don't test me. Naomi kept still. She wasn't about to give them the pleasure of watching her bend. From the corner of her vision, she saw phones being raised, people recording, murmuring, the crowd thickening with curiosity. Paula, planted in the doorway with her arms folded, wore a grin like she was front row at some cheap spectacle. It was all spiraling, and no one seemed willing to intervene. Then Delaney's radio crackled. Dispatch to Unit 3, confirm subject detained. Cooper lifted the receiver, female 40s refusing compliance. Static, then a sharp reply, be advised subject flagged federal. Repeat, flagged federal. Pentagon has initiated emergency contact. Release immediately and await instruction. Cooper's face drained of color. Delaney's smirk vanished. What the hell, he whispered. Naomi, still cuffed on the curb, stayed silent, eyes fixed on them. Cooper's hands fumbled with the keys, unlocking her wrists without meeting her gaze. His apology came out half-broken, barely audible. Naomi rose slowly, flexing her raw wrists where the metal had cut in. The crowd had gone dead quiet, Paula's smirk gone with it. Naomi bent, retrieved her phone from the pavement. Cracked screen, call dropped, sensitive transmission compromised. She met their eyes squarely. You're going to regret this, she said evenly. Not tomorrow, not next month, today. Cooper opened his mouth, but fresh lights cut across the lot. This time, not local blue and whites, but a line of black SUVs roaring in from Barksdale, tires spitting gravel. Naomi didn't wait for rescue. She braced herself. Doors swung open in unison, precision over theatrics, urgency in every stride. Leading them was Lieutenant Column Darren Mosley, mid-40s, sharp-eyed, moving with clipped certainty, a folder tucked beneath one arm, his gaze locked on Naomi immediately. "General Ellsworth, any injuries?" His voice carried firm and clear. Naomi gave one measured shake of her head. "No, Colonel, superficial. The damage is theirs." Cooper and Delaney stood stiff, realization finally hitting like a weight they couldn't throw off. The Air Force security detail closed in around Naomi, walling her off from Mosswood's officers. Mosley turned on them, expression flat steel. "You are ordered to stand down pending federal review. Any further move from you qualifies as obstruction." Cooper stuttered. "We didn't know, not acceptable." Mosley cut him cold. "You had credentials, you had orders, you chose to ignore them." Delaney tried posturing, his voice thin. She was acting suspicious. Mosley's eyes fixed on him like a blade. "You saw a black woman on a phone and made a choice that will follow you for the rest of your life." The team ushered Naomi into an SUV, doors closing around her with clinical efficiency. As the convoy pulled from the station, Naomi allowed herself one glance back, Cooper mopping sweat from his brow. Paula retreating inside the store like vermin scuttling from the light. In the SUV, Naomi said nothing. She kept her eyes on the highway as it stretched on, her mind racing. After a long silence, Mosley spoke. "Pentagon has already triggered a full inquiry, ma'am. Internal affairs, civil rights. It's going public, whether Mosswood wants it or not." Naomi didn't nod, didn't smile, didn't blink. She just kept watching the road. "They should have known better," she said quietly. Mosley gave a curt nod. "They're about to find out what it feels like when the world finally sees them for who they are." The convoy pushed forward, past long stretches of grass and sagging power lines, toward Barksdale, where Naomi's authority and her dignity would at last be recognized again. But Naomi understood the truth. The real fight was just beginning, and this time it wasn't just hers. The nation would be watching. By the time she finished her first debrief at the base, the story had already detonated across national headlines. Someone had leaked the cell phone footage. Raw, shaky video of two Mosswood cops cuffing a woman who identified herself calmly, without resistance, as a U.S. Army general. No yelling, no struggle. Just the unmistakable humiliation of someone dismissed out of arrogance and prejudice. Within hours, it was everywhere. Mosswood, once nothing more than a dot in Louisiana, had become the epicenter of a storm. News anchors replayed the footage on a loop. Commentators expressed outrage. Civil rights leaders called it exactly what it was: profiling, abuse of authority. Veterans organizations, usually cautious about politics, issued statements demanding justice for General Ellsworth. Back in Mosswood, the police department scrambled, fumbling through damage control. Chief Vernon Grady, more used to hunting blinds than press briefings, stood sweating under the lights, his cowboy hat doing nothing to shield him from the fire. "We regret the misunderstanding," he stammered, eyes darting everywhere but the cameras. "The officers are on administrative leave pending review." A young reporter from Baton Rouge cut him cold. "Chief, why couldn't trained officers recognize official credentials? Was race a factor in this so-called misunderstanding?" Grady stumbled, muttered about high tensions and mistaken identity, but the spin collapsed in real time. The department had no shield left. Meanwhile, Cooper and Delaney vanished from view. Their names leaked within hours, plastered across headlines and trending feeds. Within days, their history surfaced. Prior complaints of excessive force, racial bias, cases quietly shelved. Not anymore. Civil rights attorneys from New Orleans and Washington filed federal actions. The DOJ launched an independent probe. Even the governor weighed in, calling it a disgraceful breach of justice against a decorated officer. But it wasn't just about Naomi anymore. It was about every person stopped, doubted, demeaned for the color of their skin, the clothes they wore, or the assumptions others imposed. At Barksdale, Naomi was pulled into endless briefings. Pentagon staff, federal lawyers, even White House aides asking for updates. She answered with the same calm, unshaken voice that once carried commands across battlefields. But when the doors closed and silence settled in her quarters, the weight pressed heavy. Not because she was shocked, but because after medals, campaigns, and sacrifice, in a cracked parking lot in Mosswood, none of it had shielded her from contempt. Yet Naomi Ellsworth had never been one to run from battles, and she wasn't about to start. If she was going to speak, it would be on her terms, not only for herself, but for the unseen thousands who carried the same scars. And so the announcement came. Saturday noon, outside the gates of Barksdale Air Force Base, General Naomi Ellsworth would address the nation. Cameras crowded in tight rows, microphones stacked like weapons aimed at the podium, reporters whispered into phones, their voices blending with the hum of engines and the click of shutters. The air was thick, electric, carrying the weight of something about to break wide open. General Naomi Ellsworth stepped forward in her full-dress uniform, the deep blue pressed sharp, medals catching the sunlight. Her stance was unshakable, her gaze cutting through the crowd. She wasn't there to comfort. She wasn't there to soften the edges. Off to the side, Colonel Mosley stood with his arms crossed, a quiet sentinel flanked by Pentagon officials who had offered her carefully crafted phrases, a safe script, diplomatic padding. Naomi had declined. When she spoke, her voice carried clean across the lot, sharper than the whir of cameras. "My name is General Naomi Ellsworth," she began. "I've served this nation for nearly 3 decades, leading troops, briefing presidents, defending the principles carved into our Constitution. But yesterday, in Mosswood, Louisiana, none of that mattered." She paused, letting silence settle like a stone. "I wasn't measured by my service, by the uniform I earned, or by my record. I was measured by the color of my skin and by the assumptions made about me because of it." Pens scratched furiously, but Naomi wasn't speaking to the press. She was speaking to everyone who had watched the footage and felt that familiar sting, that reminder of being doubted, dismissed, or degraded. "I'm not here asking for apologies," she said. "I'm here because silence is complicity, because accountability matters, respect matters, human dignity matters, and none of these can ever be optional." Beyond the cameras, community members had gathered. Families, veterans, students holding signs inked by hand. Naomi saw their faces, some hardened by anger, others lifted by hope, all of them searching for what had been absent for too long: real leadership. "Injustice is not new," Naomi continued, "but change only begins when enough people refuse to look away." She ended without slogans, without theatrics, just truth. "I was not disgraced yesterday, they were. And history will record it that way." She stepped back from the podium, refusing questions. The first claps were tentative, a ripple in the silence. Then the sound grew, spreading until it became something undeniable. Naomi walked away at her own pace, steady and deliberate, not faster, not slower, carrying with her more than just her own story. She knew change would not come overnight, maybe not even in her lifetime. But maybe it would come sooner, because she had chosen not to stay silent. When you face injustice, your voice is your weapon. Speak it, even if it trembles. Someone out there needs the strength you show. If you believe in dignity, in accountability, then don't let this moment fade. Share it. Speak up when you see what's wrong. Because change starts when someone finally dares to call it by its name.